Hi, this is Ch3shire, just in case you forgot about me. I know updates were rare over the last year because I was pretty much trapped at the GSI shooting with big-ass lasers and researching for my bachelor thesis. So yeah, I'm not dead, you know. I just needed a bit of time, but now I get back to business, recording a new tutorial for Christmas. Finally! Many of you asked for this one. It's just about stereo sound, how stereo works, how you can achieve that, and how you can apply it properly in your mix. But most important for this one, only listen to this tutorial on good stereo speakers or in headphones. Laptop speakers won't work here. So at least get some earplugs so we can proceed. Alright? So here we go. Stereorize me. Part 1. Stereo theory. I know most of you don't like theory, but knowing what is actually happening often helps you out. In fact, it's pretty useful to know how stereo sound can be represented. You all know the left-right model. Humans and most other creatures here on Earth do have two ears, so it's just logic to split an audio signal into the left and right channel, one for each ear. Let's say we have two monitors in front of us in an angle of 90 degrees between them. That might not be what the studio designer tells you, but it's quite useful to visualize what's happening. Now let's play a sound on the left channel. We do hear that sound coming exactly from the position of the box, in front of us but also a little bit to the left. If you play the same sound on the right channel, the sound will appear to come from the front right. If you play that same sound on both monitors at the same time, look what happens. Both waves will add up to a single one, but the difference is that the directional part of the sound, coming from the left or the right, will cancel out and the new sound appears to be created in front of us, perfectly between the monitors. One would call that the mid of the sound. Now we invert one of the channels, let's say the right one, and add them up again. We'll discover something new. The direction from which the sound is coming is now the sides of our head. One would call that the side of the sound. We now arrived at the definition of a new model that can represent a stereo sound, the mid-side model. As in the left-right model, we have two virtual sources of the sound, but in this case it's sound coming from the front of us, the mid-channel, and sound coming from the sides of our head, the side channel. You can see that both models describe exactly the same sound, marked with a white dot, no matter what sound we hear. I visualized that using a Lissajous diagram, which is basically a simple vector diagram with an x and a y-axis. That makes it easy to understand the concept of the mid-side model, but it's probably not the most useful one, especially when it comes to the point where you actually want to calculate the values of the channels. Nevertheless, keep this visualization in mind, because we'll get back to it in FL Studio later on. Now to the mathematical way. Don't be afraid, it's really easy going. Right before, we summed up the left and the right channel to get the mid channel. And that's already the mathematical definition of the mids, the sum of the left and right divided by 2 to preserve loudness. I mean, we add two channels together, so this is quite logic. The definition of the side channel is exactly the opposite, the difference between L and R divided by 2. If you imagine your headphones, you'll agree that everything that is different in the left and right channel appears to come from the sides. And that's already it. Neat, right? We'll do exactly that later in the practical part of this tutorial, because we can now edit mids and sides separately. The clue of mid-side processing is, no matter what channel we edit now, our sound keeps being symmetric, which is smooth for the listener. But when you're done with editing, how can you return to the left-right model, because there are almost no common music plays that support mid-side playback? The conversion from mid-side to left-right is even simpler. Mid plus side is left and mid minus side is right. Simple elementary school maths. We'll get back to that later. Alright then, you did it. That was all the theory from my side now. Let's get to the more interesting part. Practice. Part 2. How to stereo. There are basically two things you want to do in stereo music production: creating stereo sounds and editing stereo sounds. But to do so, you need a little toolbox. No stereo sound without stereo tools. So here are your 4 plug-in friends for stereo production. The first thing you want to use is Fruity Balance. If you started off with FL Studio 12, you probably never heard of this one, because it's an older plugin and not marked as favorite or added to the plugin database. So why would we use a plugin with only 2 knobs? Because it's super slim and won't cost much CPU. And if you only need a panning knob here, this is the way you want to go. The second one is Maximus. It comes with the FL Studio Signature bundle, so some of you might not have it. The good message: Maximus only has a little shortcut to what we will do later on with mid-side processing, so don't panic. The third plugin is the Fruity Stereo Enhancer. You'll find that one in the gain category, and most of you should have it. The last and most important one is the Fruity Stereo Shaper. This one is gold because we can convert left-right signals to mid-side signals and backwards. Okay then, time to get started. So which ways do we know to make a sound stereo? The first and easiest one is panning. When we play back a sound and use the pan knob of the Fruity Balance, one channel just gets louder and one quieter. Our brain thinks that the ear that receives the louder signal must be closer to the source of the sound. That's an almost bulletproof way to place a sound in your stereo image, because it always works, will always keep your sound sharp and well defined, and nothing will be lost when your track is played back in mono. So if you want to place a sharp sound like a percussion element or so in your stereo image, and you want it to stay sharp and shiny in any case, panning is your friend. Another way our brain determines the position of a sound is the phase difference between the left and right ear. We can simulate that using the Fruity Stereo Shaper. This delay knob adds delay to the left or right channel. If a sound is placed in front of our face, it will arrive at the same time in both ears. But if you place it on one side, the rear ear will receive the sound about 1 millisecond later. Every position in between will result in a lower delay time. The pro of adding just a delay to the left or right channel is that the amplitudes of both channels stay the same, which generally is a good thing. The contra though is that your track loses some of its mono compatibility, which I will talk about in the third chapter of this tutorial. Nevertheless, if you combine the phase technique with simple panning, you can get some very natural experienced positions in your stereo image. Of course, you should ask yourself if natural really is the shit when it comes to EDM, but if you ever want to create a cinematic intro or a percussion solo that gives anyone the creeps, you might actually want to use that combination. But what happens if you increase the delay of the sound over 1 millisecond or far beyond? That is the point where our brain loses the correlation between the left and right channel. It won't be able to figure out an exact position of the sound and instead assume it comes from all direction or it is split up into different frequency ranges that come from different directions or so. If you have a wide pad or a hypersaw or something comparable, this can actually benefit your track. As the sound comes from everywhere, our brain tends to concentrate on sharper sounds in the center of the mix. Yet the problem is that from this point you can't tell what happens to your sound when the track is played back in mono. So you shouldn't use that if most of your people listen to the track on an iPad. Losing that correlation between the left and right channel can be achieved quite effectively by inverting either the left or the right channel's polarity. You can do that with the Fruity Stereo Shaper by moving one of the channel faders to a negative polarity. Or you just use the Fruity Stereo Enhancer and check one of the inversion boxes. Coming back to our theory part, this step makes all the differences between left and right to equalities and all equalities to differences. Or in other words, inverting one of the channels swaps the mid and side channels. Everything that was in the sides is in the mids now, and everything that was in the mids is in the sides. You've got to find the advantages of that step by yourself, because even though it's a quite interesting effect, I didn't find that much of a use in it. When you turn a mono signal into a 100% side signal, it will get entirely lost in the moment where the track is bounced to mono and played in the club. The only thing that kinda works is to combine that inversion with a phase shift, because flipping one channel changes the mono compatibility a bit and can make it either better or worse. Try it, and if you find a more useful application for this technique, let me know. You will agree that this is a pretty brutal way to force the sound to become stereo. There is a more elegant and subtle way to do so. For example, did you know that delay and reverb also can add that stereo feeling to your sound? The good thing is that your dry signal stays exactly where it used to be. The easiest way is to use a ping-pong delay. Just take a Fruity delay and activate the ping-pong checkbox. That swaps the left and right channel on the internal feedback loop, making the delay on the channel bounce between left and right. That effect is only notable when the left and right channel are different, or in other words, our signal already has stereo information. But what if we have a mono signal? In this case, just tweak the internal input panning of the delay effect right here. Voila! Simple but effective. You can also use the reverb to achieve some stereo room. The Fruity Reverb 2 does support a stereo separation knob on the wet output only. Even mono signals will be blurred into the stereo image with this effect. This doesn't make your raw sound stereo, but you are now able to place mono signals within a three-dimensional room, which again gives us that stereo feeling. But of course, where would we go without some disadvantages on this technique? Because even though both techniques leave our raw signal untouched, they add the wet signal into our mix. As mentioned in my mixdown tutorial, too much of delay and reverb will drown your mix. And man, you're so fucked up if that happens, because I personally would rather listen to a well-mixed mono track than to a blurry, muddy and undefined stereo mix. So even if delay and reverb are nice ways to add that stereo feeling, don't overdo it. You know, less effects are often more effective. Yeah, by now we only talked about effects that you can apply to your sounds. But as we all produce electronic music, just assuming that by the way, if you produce classical music, you're probably watching the wrong tutorial. So as we're producing electronic music, we often have to deal with synthesizers. In case you're one of those spineless half-done producers who only use synth samples in their productions, go get somewhere and start to create your own signature sounds, or at least learn how to edit presets for your advantages. The good thing of making sounds all by yourself is that you have full access to the stereo properties. I won't go too much in depth with this topic because it's rather a sound design topic, but at least I want to mention a fast and powerful way to add this big stereo feeling to many sounds. We're talking about Unison. Most advanced software synthesizers do support that feature. Unison basically only clones the single voice of a synthesizer and slightly adjusts some parameters of the cloned voice, in most cases the pitch, phase and panning. Some synthesizers even do support manual linking of parameters to that detuning process. In Ch3shire, for example, you are free to draw custom mappings for many parameters. You can really go crazy with that feature and create unique stereo signature sounds. But I'm getting lost. So what are the ups and downs for that way to make a stereo sound? The big up is definitely the way that a synth with heavy unison goes all over the stereo image and creates this big stereo sound. The most popular example is the hypersaw that you can hear in almost every uplifting trance track and in a good amount of big room tracks. Do you hear how that synth seems to come from all directions at once? But as you already might suggest, that technique is only suitable for sounds that are dedicated to be spread over bigger parts of the stereo image. If you apply unison to a sound that once was mono, you will change its whole character. Just keep this in mind as you are using it. The big down of that technique is that you lose all control over the mono compatibility of your track. Most hypersaw synths do sound awful when the track is dumped down to mono. A similar, but more controlled approach is to create unison effects by manually cloning synths or audio layers. Sometimes it's just fine to create 3 copies of a sound, then leave one in the center of the stereo image and pan the others hard to the left and right. Then you are able to apply changes to the left and right one separately or to use some effects. In this case, every step of the stereo creation is in your hands, which is not the easiest or fastest way, but definitely one with the most creative freedom. Just make sure that you always compensate the latency of the used plugins on the other layers. And if you use filtering, you might want to use linear phase filters to avoid phase cancellations. That's not as dramatic as it sounds right now. You probably remember my mixdown tutorial. There is a rough explanation of the concept. There are some free linear phase equalizers out there. I'm using FiltrateLE, which might not be perfect, but it's fine in my opinion. There'll be a link in the description to that one. Good thing about FiltrateLE, you can manually adjust the latency introduced by the equalizer and samples and therefore exactly compensate it in the other channels. Or, the easier way, you just apply filtrate to all the 3 channels with the same latency and just don't activate the equalizer bands on the other channels. That'll solve your latency problem as well. Okay then, we discussed ways how to achieve stereo sounds in detail. But what do if you already have a stereo sound that doesn't fit? Here's the second chapter of the practice tutorial. Ways to edit a stereo sound. The simplest application is to widen up or narrow a stereo sound. So if you think a sound is spread in the stereo image too much or less, you can just use a stereo separation knob. Those knobs adjust the balance between the mid and side channels, without changing the volume of the total signals too much. You can either use the knob of the mixer track itself, it's down here in my layout, but you probably have to search for it a bit, or you use the Fruity Stereo Enhancer. It's the button on the left. That is also a good way to check how your track sounds in mono. Just drag this knob all the way up to merge the stereo signal to mono. You should do that from time to time to check if any layer sounds strange in mono. Maximus offers another useful implementation of that function. As Maximus is a multiband compressor, it splits the signal into 3 frequency bands. And next to a compression, limiting and saturation, it also offers us a stereo separation control in every single band, so we can handle the stereo information different for every frequency band. In case you don't own Maximus, don't panic. We still have Patcher, so you could build that rig yourself. Besides that, it's only a shortcut for something we'll do in a few minutes. A more advanced approach to stereo separation and a whole lot of other concepts is recombining the left and right channel. This is the point where we finally do what we are talking about the whole time: extracting the mid signal and the side signal. Let's take a closer look to that ominous mixer matrix of the Fruity Stereo Shaper. We've got 4 faders here, 2 for the left and 2 for the right channel. The signal of the 2 faders on the left goes out to the left channel, and the 2 on the right goes out to the right channel. The inputs are defined by the position of the faders, while the yellow faders represent the left input and the red ones the right input. As you see, by default, left out channel only receives the signal from the left input and the right output only from the right input. That means we are listening to the original sound.
Left, right, mid, left, right.
I can increase the inputs by dragging the corresponding faders up, let's say the left one,
mid,
and decreasing it by dragging it down.
Mid, left, right, mid, side, left.
When I hit the middle
mid,
position,
side,
the signal is
right,
muted, and when
mid,
I drag it
side,
below the 0 point,
right,
the polarity
mid,
of the
side,
signal is
left,
inverted.
right,
We used that
side,
before.
left,
That alone
right,
would be pretty boring,
side,
but we have
left,
the
right,
ability
mid,
to mix the
side,
left
left,
input into
right,
the right
mid,
output and the
left,
other way
right,
around.
mid,
For example, I
left,
can mute the
right,
left signal
mid,
on the left
side,
output
left,
and
right,
instead
mid,
add in the right
side,
signal.
right,
Now we hear
mid,
the right channel
side,
on both the left and right
mid,
speaker.
side, right, mid, side.
With that
Right,
knowledge, the
mid,
fun begins,
side,
because
left,
now we can
right,
mix the
mid,
left and right channel
left,
just as
right,
we like to
mid.
do. Do you still remember that mathematical lesson from the theory part? The mid channel was defined as the sum of left and right divided by 2. So let's do that. The level of the faders in the hint bar is given in decibels, so we need to know how to translate 1/2 into decibels. The formula is: the loudness in decibels is 20 times the logarithm of the voltage ratio to the base of 10. For a voltage ratio of 1/2, this is minus 6.02059913 decibels, or approximately minus 6 dB. Good for us, we don't need to remember this crap, because of RStudio is smart and the faders snap into the exact value if you look closely. So let's turn the input sliders to minus 6 dB each. And this is it.
Right.
Now
mid,
you're listening to the mid channel of
left,
the signal,
right, mid,
on the left and on the right
right,
channel.
mid,
And for the side channel,
left, right,
it is
mid.
defined as the left channel minus the right channel, all divided by 2. To do so, we just have to invert the red right input faders. Now the right signal is subtracted from the left and we've got the side channels.
Left, right, side, left, right, side, left, right, side, left.
We now can do funny things. In the last point, we used the stereo separation knob. But can we do that manually? Ha! Rhetorical question. I know how to keep you awake. Of course we can. If we want to increase the stereo
Right,
separation, we need to
left,
increase the
right,
side to mid
mid,
ratio.
left,
To do
right,
so, we need
mid,
to subtract the right from the left and the
mid,
left from the right channel a
left,
bit.
right,
Do you
mid,
hear how the mix is getting
left,
focused on
right,
the sides?
left, right, mid, left, right, mid, side, left, right, mid, left, right, mid, left, right, mid, side, left, right, mid.
The only
Left,
thing that
right,
makes the
mid,
stereo separation a
left,
smarter
right,
solution here
mid,
is that FL Studio
left,
knows
right,
exactly how
mid,
to adjust the volume
left,
of the
right,
signal
mid,
so the signal doesn't get
left,
louder or
right,
silent.
mid,
We can only
left,
guess that.
right,
But
mid,
as this was a purely
left,
educational
right,
step,
mid,
it's absolutely
left,
fine.
right, mid,
Hopefully.
left, right, mid, left, right, mid, left, right, mid.
Now to the practical part. Why do I bother you with this mixer matrix stuff? The magic word is mid-side processing. Because it's often very useful to apply different filters to the mid and side parts of the signal, because everything stays nice in symmetry to the center of the stereo image, no matter what you do. For that purpose, we want to get the mid and side signal somehow separated into two mixer tracks. And again, FL Studio is quite smart and knows what we want, because it's very simple to achieve that. Just route the signal to an empty mixer track and call it mid. Then you need to sidechain that track to another empty mixer track, for example the one next to it, and call that one side. Back to the mid track, apply a fruity stereo shaper. From the presets, we can select the mid preset, because we are too lazy and we don't want to adjust 4 faders by ourselves. And we're done with our basic rig. The most basic mid-side processing would be volume adjustment. With those two channels, I can turn down the mid channel, for example, to leave the side information. Or the other way around, no big deal. More interesting things are joining the game when you start filtering. Let's apply an equalizer to the mid and side channel. Ooh, surprise, we don't see anything on the side EQ. That's an interesting thing, the Fruity Equalizer 2 only visualizes the mid information. And as there is only side information on this track, the display stays empty. But clever as you are, you're just taking 2 more stereo shapers on the side channel, one at slot 1, one at slot 10, and invert one of the channels in both instances. Now the side information is swapped with the empty mid channel, gets processed by the equalizer, gets converted into side information again. Problem solved. So what can we do with mid-side equalizing? There's an interesting effect on the listener when it comes to the frequency balance between mid and side. You know that the brain tends to focus on the sound that is coming from the front of our face, the direction where we are looking at. We could also say that our brain focuses on the mid channel. On the other hand, the side channel is usually experienced as the environment or the ambient of the stereo image. So what happens if we increase the high frequencies of the side channel or lower it in the mid? The whole ambience seems to become colder. If you want a warm ambience, you just do the opposite thing. Part 3. Mixdown aspects. By now you know how to handle single sounds. But if you try to build a stereo image in a whole mix, that's a whole different story. First of all, there are a couple of principles that you should keep in mind. First principle: the listener's focus is always in the middle of the stereo image, so sounds with priority should stay in the center. Second principle: the sides should always be covered by attendant and ambient sounds. Third, our ears can't locate deep frequencies, so center them to avoid fence cancellation problems. If we are going for a clean, well-defined and punchy mix, frequencies up to 200 Hz should stay in the center. You could achieve that using Maximus, as an example.
Fourth, generally, the left and right channel should be balanced. If the hi-hats only appear in the left ear, the listener will go crazy. So if you pan an element to the side, there should always be a similar sounding element on the other side to keep the balance. And the last one, keep an eye on mono compatibility. Well, mono compatibility. I said that word a few times, but I want to make that one really clear. It doesn't matter how much you focus on the quality of a track, there will always be idiots out there that listen to your track on an iPod or so. And no matter how much time you spend into mixing that track, you won't convince those people of yourself if it sounds crap on an iPad. And what makes it sound crap is not necessarily the fact that the iPad doesn't have a 10-inch subwoofer. It's the fact that it only has one speaker. It's the fact that the audio is dumbed down to a mono signal. And if you used phase shifting to make your hypersaw synthesizer super wide, phase cancellations appear. If you remember, adding up the left and the right channel results in the mid channel. So the side information are completely gone. Check that out. Sounds nice to you? Yeah, it does, in case you didn't listen to it on an iPad. But if I drag the stereo separation knob up to 100%, the signal will be crushed down to mono. Let's listen to it again. Do you hear this phasey thin character? It sounds interesting, but not the way that a hypersaw should sound. There is no real way to avoid this effect on every mixer track, but you can try to change the delay time on the left and right channel until the mono signal sounds at least acceptable to your ears. That might not work too good with a hypersaw, but maybe with a sweet little pad in the background. So just drag the stereo knob here up from time to time to check if everything sounds okay to you. Now to the last part, practice. As you know the basics of stereo production now, it's time for you to do your homework. It's Christmas, so I prepared a little demo project for you. Nothing special, just some basic elements. Let's listen to it. As you can hear, most of the audio layers here are mono, or at least close to mono. So it's completely up to you to decide how you want to build the stereo image. But by the way, the percussion samples delivered with that project are from the Cincinnati Sounds Volume 1 pack available from Futorial.de. You should check those packs out. Those Futorial guys just know what they are doing, and they are 100% independent. Alright, I'll just go over that project without talking too much, using some of the discussed techniques to make a stereo track out of this mono project. Let's hold on for a before and after comparison. You can definitely tell the difference between those. If you take your time to go over it, I'm sure you can do better than me in 5 minutes. Go ahead and download the project in the description. If you need some feedback, feel free to send your edit to me. As long as I don't get 100 requests a day, I'll do my best to answer you. Alright, that's it. Tell me in the comments if you liked this tutorial and subscribe this channel if you did. Be sure to download the free Christmas packs from previous years from our page, and of course, have a nice day. Merry Christmas!